What is your best chuckles I'm in danger story? What happened? Went out for a drink with a pretty girl I got talking to on a bus. She was a bit awkward, but seemed kinda fun. She kept talking about her roommate and the crazy hijinks they got up to. She even joked that we would have a threesome if I went back to her place. We went back to hers, at which point I found out that her roommate was a Barbie doll that she talked to like it was a real person. Her place clearly hadn't been cleaned for years, and the toilet was full of green matter. The final straw for me was when I stepped on her cat's corpse. Out hiking in the forest, saw a grizzly bear down at the bottom of a big hill, standing on the other side of a stream. The thing looked beautiful and almost not real. Then it moved, so ducking fast to jump into the stream and start fishing out salmon. And for a second it was beautiful, and then it was terrifying. I let out a gasp and the damn thing looked up at me. I just froze and backed away slowly. I don't know what you're supposed to do in a situation like that, but I'm quite sure if he had wanted me dead, I would have gone. Almost every time I got behind the wheel of my uncle's 06 Mega Cab diesel, after I got to experience the death wobble for the first time. He got it fixed shortly after it happened, but I was always cautious. I'll never forget the time I was driving my Jeep home from the cellar for the first time and going down a major Texas highway at 75 plus miles per hour and getting my ass absolutely obliterated by death wobble. Scared the ever-loving shit out of me. I feel ya, mate. Thankfully my uncle was in the passenger seat when it happened, but I damn near shit my pants because these mega cabs are big and heavy. He said the best way to get it to stop is to actually accelerate rather than stop. Back when he'd put massive tires and lift kits on his trucks, whenever they got the death wobble they'd sometimes do a full lane change on their own. I used to work in a group home. I was working a night shift, and one of the residents was pacing by his room. I asked him what he was doing. He went into his room quickly. I assumed he was on meth salts. That's what he liked doing. Thought not much of it, until a few hours goes by. I go to get some water and heat up my food, and he is standing in the hallway. Again, I ask him how he's doing, and try to check in with him. This guy starts speaking in some made-up language in a loud whisper. Think Harry Potter talking to the basilisk. He then takes like 4 steps slowly toward me, then stops. He says I can't stop him forever. I say duck this. Call police for his and everyone else in the house's safety. Police show up and talk to him for a bit in private. One officer comes back to my office and says yee. He's not himself right now. Said the date was May 50, 2100, it was January, and 2015. They took him away. They also found and took a pocket knife off of him and gave it to me for safekeeping. Now if that wasn't already ducked up, I went back on the security footage and I saw him stand outside of my office door outside my view for like 30 minutes without me realizing. Standing ducking still, like in Paranormal Activity. I checked the camera from when he was speaking the weird language, and he was standing there for like 20 minutes heavy breathing before I walked by. 2 weeks goes by, and he's released from the hospital sober and mentally present again. He decided to move out of the house. He came by to grab his stuff, and pulled me aside to apologize. I forgave him, and tried to brush it off. But he looks me in the eyes, and said that he was planning on killing me that night for a blood sacrifice, since he was seeing some crazy shit and he believed the demon was controlling him. But the police ruined his plan. I kept the knife as a morbid souvenir. Long ago, a friend of mine used to traffic weed down into Utes, where we lived. He would buy it off a pair of Native Americans living on a reservation bordering Canada. I decided to go along for the ride once, bravely disregarding the stories passed on of these guys firing automatic weapons and border patrol, no clue if this was actually the case or not. When we got to their compound I had to wait in the car for about 15-20 minutes while my friend's partner explained to them how I'm cool and not an arc. It was as I was waiting in the car that it occurred to me that if these guys decided that they didn't like the look of me, they could just kill me and nobody would ever find me. In the end, they were cool. Ended up being invited into their cabin, which incidentally had a bunch of automatic weapons hanging on the wall. Ended up smoking a J with one of the Native Americans while he showed off his shiny new twin Glocks. I honked at the car in front of me to go. The light was green. The dude shot me the bird in his side mirror, probably because I startled him when he was distracted on his phone, and because honking is inherently annoying, so I honked again. I was starting to get mad, and he was too. I could tell by his tail lights that he put the car in park. Then the driver's door opened. I was like, here we go. But then the biggest man I've ever seen stepped out. All those never back down thoughts I had imagined in my head vanished. I chuckled to myself as the word duck escaped my mouth. I had just enough room to reverse and get the duck out of there. I honked again for good measure. Not really, but I thought about it after the fact. Probably would been funny. I had sort of a similar situation. I was driving with my nephew in the car, and some car almost cut me off. So I ended up slamming on my brakes. I didn't honk at the dude, because I was in a not so great part of town. Next thing I know, the person behind me who also had to slam on their brakes to avoid me came flying around my car, almost sideswiped my car, and brake checked me. He drove half a block and did it again. But this time he brought his car to a full stop and started to get out of his car. He had a gun on his hip, but hadn't grabbed for it. But I wasn't about to find out if he was going to use it. He thankfully stopped in the middle of an intersection. So I quickly turned left and drove faster than I care to admit out of there, and zigzagged through the city to make sure he couldn't follow us. My nephew thankfully was completely oblivious to the whole situation. Only asked why I was driving weird. I told him there was construction and I decided to go a different way. Couple of years ago I was picking up a chair I had bought from Craigslist. I drove to this guy's house and got a creepy vibe instantly when I stepped inside. For reasons I can't really understand to this day. After a minute or so of small talk, where he was mostly busy staring at me and not completely focused on the conversation, he asked me to follow him down to the basement where the chair supposedly was. As he went for the staircase, he raised the volume of the music playing to a level that was distinctly louder than normal. I noped the duck out and went straight home again. Not me, but a really close friend was going through flight school and they were going through emergency procedures, and the instructor asked something along the lines of, "What would you do if you noticed power was lost?" And at that very moment, the aircraft lost power, and my buddy said, "Well, that's a neat trick and makes it feel real." To which the instructor said, "No, that's not me, this is real." Apparently my buddy giggled and said, "Oh no." And then they had to crash into the Gulf and he swam away. I can't think of a better example than that. One night I was at a sketch 24-hour laundromat. I was a stupid 20-something kid, and I was there way too late. And I got shit-faced on wall clicker waiting for the machines to finish. I go out to my car to smoke a cigarette and some guy pushes his way in trying to get a cigarette off of me. He's being really rude, and I shove him hard off of me. He falls and I go back inside and get my shit. The next morning I realized that dude was trying to carjack me, but I was way too ducked up to realize it. He was pulling a knife when I shoved him, and he tore out of there because he assumed I was calling the cops. So, just for context, I'm Scottish. I was on holiday in Durham, and it was late afternoon. We just arrived, and we were going to visit the cathedral. So these lads, likely students, they were obviously on a night out or something, came up to me and were like, "Hey, do you know how to get to so and so street?" And I was like, "Sorry, I'm not from here." Suddenly the guy got mad and was all, "Are you Irish? Are you Irish?" And I was like, "No, I'm Scottish," but I was sure I was going to get beaten up because, let's be honest, if he's like this to someone who's Irish, then he'll not exactly be hunky-dory with Scots. But when I said that his demeanor did a 180 and he was all, "Oh right, you're cool. Sorry to bother you," and walked off. And that's the story of when I was nearly hattercrimed because someone thought I was Irish. Was recording a music video for a local musician when like 7 of the trashiest people I've ever seen, his friends I imagine, showed up with a few of them having blood on their clothes. They got comfy and all 7 of them pulled their guns out of their wasterband and started talking about how they just carjacked someone to get there in time for the video shoot and they needed a place to stash the car. This was rural Alabama, so just behind the tree line was fine. We finished the shoot with the one rule, being no guns pointed at the camera. The most hyped group of young men I've ever seen in front of a camera for how bad the music was. Lovely sunny day in Scotland. Weather forecast was fine. Mrs. CP and I decided to climb a Munro, not a mountain, but definitely more than a hill, wearing jogging bottoms, trainers, t-shirts and light jackets. Of course. The weather forecast at 3500 Fahrenheit is very different to the weather forecast at sea level. The top third of the thing was knee-shattering scree with no path, horizontal rain, visibility of about 6 feet. Depth about 10 feet either side of where we were walking. We got to the top, but we're inching our way back down in tears and frozen agony. Thankfully another couple, who were wearing proper gear and who climbed this thing every other weekend, passed us on their way back down and asked if we'd like to follow them to below the cloud line where the path started again. When we got back, Mrs. CP's lips were blue for a good couple of hours. Afterwards I couldn't walk properly for over a week. How many times have we all seen people on the news being picked up by mountain rescue because they tried to climb something in completely inappropriate clothing? And we've said, look at those stupid bastards. Well, that day, we were those stupid bastards. Many years ago, I was on a train going home in the middle of the night, dead of winter, heavy snow. Last stop, shortly after I got on, a friendly train hooligan started up a conversation, and we got onto the topic of psychedelics. I was a bit of a drug addict at the time, so this was common ground. He got up and sat next to me, and the conversation continued. He pulled out a blunt wrapper, started rolling a blunt with a black looking tar, and asked repeatedly if I had ever smoked wet before. I asked what that was, and apparently, it was PCP. Near the end of the ride, he asked if they could walk me home. It was a mild walk, which consisted of going past a shady woods, a cemetery with few lights, a haunted retirement home, and then suburban houses, with certainly no other awake humans at this hour. I repeatedly and politely declined, suddenly becoming aware of the danger I was in. He seemed quite nice. We had a good talk, but getting off the train usually means goodbye. However, he insisted, and since I had no other way of getting home, no money, and being a polite Midwesterner, I accepted his escort. He said he would only walk halfway, and then walk back to the train. We begin our walk in the dark, silent, snowy suburban sprawl. He pulls out the blunt of PCP. I've smoked many a joint with friendly strangers before, but, dude, this was PCP. He asked if I wanted some. No thank you. He lights it, and starts smoking. Our conversation still friendly and jovial, but I knew just how shady this was. He seemed fine, though. Even halfway through his blunt, he asked if I wanted a hit again. Realizing how rare and strange of an opportunity this was, I gave in, and took 3 drags. True to his word, like a gentleman, he walked me exactly halfway, to the edge of my town, where the darkness ended, and the houses began. We said goodbye, and he was gone. The trees were quite windy that night. At the time my 19 male was camping with my then girlfriend, my best friend and his girlfriend at a secluded lake where there is no official campground or anything. We're all 18, 19 years old. It was literally the 4 of us putting up 2 tents and making a fire on the beach in the middle of nowhere in the woods. We are sitting around the fire and these 2 4x4s come tearing around the opposite side of the lake. We knew they saw our fire and wondered if they were going to come our way. Well, they did. 6 guys get out of these pickup trucks, all with beers in their hands, all looking very much like Deliverance came to our campsite. There are no other people around. There are no houses. We are in the middle of nowhere with 6 dudes stopping by. We knew this could be bad. We had little chance of taking on 6 guys out. Didn't have a gun or anything. But, unbelievably, nothing happened. Not a thing. They chatted with us and sat around the fire. They ended up giving us beers and taking off, but that was the I'm in danger moment. That holds its place in my mind as being the time we dodged a bullet. This started out like a story from a campsite I came across before. Me and some buddies were tooling around the mountain at night. We came to a campsite that just looked completely abandoned abruptly. Half-eaten food on plates, food on the ground, fire embers still glowing in a dying fire in the pit. A game of apples to apples. Halfway played cards were still dealt out around the table. It was seriously like they disappeared mid-camp. Never knew what happened there, but we didn't stick around long. Some friends and I traversed the Rocky Mountains mostly off-road. There were a few spots where we were forced to find a formal road. Let me tell you something, friends, when they close a mountain pass, they're ducking serious about the danger. How bad can it be? Come on. It'll be fun. That sounds crazy scary. My friends knew some good camping spots in the Adirondacks, but to get there you had to go down an old logging trail. Old, as in donkey cart old, not modern logging tracks. We haven't done mass-scale logging in the Adirondacks for decades. All the times we've gone, there's been a ranger at the start of the road that gives you a lecture about how this is not a road. If you get stuck, they are not coming to help you. AAA will charge $500 just to enter this logging trail, and then their regular charges start. There is no cell service. If you crash, you will need to hike out, and then hike for several miles until you reach cell service. Do you understand? With an implied dumbest underneath that. First time, I was in the back just gaping at him. My friends decide that, since it's not a road, that means they can drink and drive. Careening down this old ass donkey trail at the edge of a steep drop-off, hooting and popping beers. The rest of the time, I just drank with them. Duck it. The drunk ones usually survive the crash. Right. I did not make smart friend group choices sometimes. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.